All right, let's start off with Chicago. Chicago has really become ground zero when it comes to this topic of the National Guard. This all started about 30 days ago when Donald Trump said that he was not only calling the National Guard or activating the National Guard in D.C., but that he was also taking control of the local police in D.C. This was done quite easily because in D.C., there is a clause, there is a law that gives the president a jurisdiction to be able to do this. DC is not a state, it is a district, and it grants the president this jurisdiction. A lot of the debate that we're seeing now is because there are critics who are saying that the president cannot do this in other states or in other cities. The president, however, is also looking at other laws and other acts that give him the authority to temporarily use the National Guard and activate the National Guards in cities when there is an extraordinary situation or crisis in this place. Angelina, I want to start with you. I want to analyze a little bit of these last 30 days in DC first. Many of the stats that the administration is putting forward is they've seen a drastic drop in crime in DC since the president has taken these steps. There's been a drastic change in these 30 days. This is part of the reason why the president says he wants to take this model to other cities. So my question to you is, one, do you believe these stats? Do you think it's worked in DC? And second, when it comes to this debate of does the president have the authority to do these in other states, what's your opinion here?
Well, absolutely, it's necessary. Strong, decisive action does promote law and order. So, going back to the neighborhood that I grew up in, the women who stayed usually shared the same fates: incarcerated, murdered, or forgotten. Because my street had a history of gang and drug violence. It was truly an addict's paradise. And that's why I'm one of the most tough on crime individuals you may ever come across, because I've seen what happens when crime runs unchecked. And here's the bottom line is that criminals don't take soft penalties easily. Probation and fines, they don't stop repeat offenders. Change only comes when they are humbled through either real rehabilitation or prison time. And when that happens, entire neighborhoods benefit because parents feel safer. Kids can play outside, women feel safe walking down the street. Everyone wins. So when President Trump talks about using the National Guard to restore order, it's not a permanent takeover like so many of these critics are making it perceive as. No, it's a temporary measure just to get structure and safety back in place, which I wholeheartedly endorse. Critics are going to say, no, Mr. President, stay out of Chicago. It's unlawful. But let's be honest, Chicago needs help. My family's from there. My tios, they still live there. And for 13 years straight, Chicago has led the nation in murders. Out of Chicago's 150,000 reported crimes since January 1st, arrests were made in only approximately 16% of them. So what does that mean? It means that 84% of criminals face zero real consequence. And what's the result? The result is that Chicago now has more illegal guns recovered than New York and Los Angeles combined. So, families raising children, I can imagine they do support Trump's America First approach. It sends out a loud, clear message that career criminals can no longer have this free ride. And if someone would rather disagree and just let Chicago burn and then accept help, they're part of the problem.
Monet, and I want to ask you a little bit about the nuances on the politics of this. It does seem like there's really a little bit of two sides. I don't see this urgency from the cities that have been called out by Donald Trump. He's focused on Baltimore. He's focused on Chicago. He's focused on LA. I haven't heard sort of an urgency from these mayors of wanting to collaborate with the president. Again, they're focusing on their two main points that the mayors are saying is, one, crime is down, right? They're saying this isn't necessary because crime has gone down, and second, the president doesn't have the jurisdiction. Why don't these mayors, one, yes, let's say crime is down. It seems statistically some of the crime is down. That doesn't mean that crime isn't there. That doesn't mean that people haven't been shot. That means that people aren't dealing with car robberies, with hijacking, etc. Crime is still existent in these areas. And let's say the president doesn't have the jurisdiction, but they can invite them. The National Guard can be activated in collaboration with governors and with mayors. Why do you think the Democrats are so one-sided in this issue?
Yeah, so I think we have to get back to the root of the issue, which is can he or should he? Can the president do this and should he? And I think that what people are recognizing and these Democratic mayors don't want to address is that they have failed. When you look at what happened in LA, they did not have control of the riots. When you look at what has happened in Chicago, Brandon Mayer Johnson has horrible approval ratings. I think his approval ratings right now are 26%. And so I think he's just, trying to throw a Hail Mary. The problem, though, is that crime is rampant in these cities. I think over Labor Day weekend, 47 people were shot, 7 were killed. I mean, that's horrible. Now, it is the responsibility of the mayor, it's the responsibility of these governors to take action. If they were doing their jobs, we would not have to have a conversation about the National Guard. However, I think Trump needs to be very careful in this area, though, because I'm a conservative and I believe in limited government. It does bother me that he says things like, we're going in. I think that any president that says that in regards to the military with its citizens, that's tricky, right? So, and the reason that these Democrats are saying he doesn't have the right to do this or the legal grounds is because of the Posse Comitatus Act. And again, there's very nuanced, which is if Trump is protecting federal buildings and agents, he absolutely has the right to use the National Guard to do this. And it sounds like that's the plan, right? Is with these ICE agents, with the federal buildings, that he wants to go in and make sure that they're protected and that these ICE agents can do their jobs. However, outside of that, which is what the ruling was in California with the judge regarding the LA riots, these federal agents or the National Guard cannot do more than that. It's very clear in the law that they need to be there to protect federal agents. Now, if the state government decides that it wants to deploy its National Guard, they can absolutely do that. So again, I think it goes back to people need to sit down and go, well, can he or should he? And I think with some of the things that have already been discussed, maybe he should. But we also need to make sure that we're checking and watching the executive branch and making sure that it's not overreaching its powers. Just because, we need to do this right now and get control of our cities, what does that mean long term for the power of the executive branch?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of valid points there, Monet, and it brings me to one of the questions that I did have. So I'm going to come to you, Angelina. There is, if we were to play devil's advocate on some of these, the president is what's kind of fascinating about what's going on is he is taking the interpretation of the law and challenging what have been per se norms, right? And these are norms just because it's what other presidents have done. That doesn't mean that these are norms established by judges or that they've been challenging courts. It just means that the president is taking them and sort of challenging them a step further. So my question is going to be two-part. One, the president is taking it further than we've seen many other presidents take it. Is there a level of comfortability that then when it's President, let's say AOC, when it's President Kamala Harris, when it's President Gavin Newsom, and these presidents has already been sent by Trump, are conservatives going to be okay with, again, a President Gavin Newsom going into Texas and saying, we're going to take control of the National Guard here. We're going to come into this neighborhood. And a two-part question, if I may. The other aspect is the president has seemed to zero in on blue cities, right? Memphis in Tennessee also has a high rate. It might not have the same numbers because Chicago's a bigger city. There's also, if I'm not mistaken, New Orleans in Louisiana. There are several more sort of red states that the president hasn't really leaned into. So what are your thoughts in this space here?
Well, he's definitely prioritizing the cities that need the most help. Like I said, Chicago for 13 consecutive years has led the nation in murders. So that is a crisis. I would understand if people feeling concerned over this if he was entering and trying to deploy the National Guard to cities that were at a moderate pace or were very comparable to other cities. But no, when for 13 consecutive years, murders are leading in a particular area, that is a crisis. And like I said, since January 1st, 150,000 reported crimes, and only 6 of them resulted in arrest. It gets to a point where absolutely we need to start relying on those principles of peace through strength. And, there are very valid remarks regarding the executive branch maybe overstepping, and that's very understandable. However, when children no longer feel safe to go outside, when mothers don't feel safe walking their children to the bus stop because of recent gang violence, those are not American values. That's when we definitely need to step in. And it's very temporary. This is not permanent. It's not like the National Guard are going to relocate and establish themselves in the suburbs of Chicago. It's not true. This is very temporary. And I do believe that the Trump administration should emphasize on that, and they should let the public know, let the media know, hey, this is the time frame. These are our goals. And I think thus far, he's been very vocal about it. I believe that the Trump administration does an incredible job at letting the public know exactly what he's thinking, which I think is a blessing. Like you said, how would Texans feel if, President Gavin Newsom, President AOC steps in and they're doing the same thing in Texas? A lot of Texans here don't appreciate crime at all. A lot of Texans here will call out Dallas, will call out Houston. Houston is a big talk here. A lot of Texans wish that crime was checked. And so here on out, Governor Abbott, he's done a pretty good job at it. However, if it got that far, I'm sure Texans would appreciate the help regardless. This isn't about politics.
And I think that, yeah, I think that's a key point there. To me, what surprises me is that, to me, there's almost like a very easy solution here. If you're a mayor and you hold the opinion that the president doesn't have the jurisdiction to come in, but you also have to recognize that you can invite the president and the National Guard to come in. To your point, Chicago, year after year, we hear the stats of everything from robberies to shootings to actual murders. I would think there would be a level of let's work together. I almost would love to see all these mayors, both from blue states, red states, you mentioned Houston, almost come together at the White House, almost hold like a mayor's conference at the White House where they're saying, Mr. President, let's work together. Let's work with our governors. Let's work with your plan. There's something in D.C. that has happened in these last 30 days where crime has gone down. Let's take that as a case study. Let's apply that in their states. Because again, to emphasize one of the points I made earlier, I get it. In some of these states, they're showing that certain stats point to crime being down. But when you look at those numbers, they are still significant numbers. I get it. You can maybe compare it to another stat and say there's less. That doesn't mean it's solved. The family that is dealing with murders, the people who are not safe in their neighborhoods, the kids who can't go out and play or just walk to school, they still care about these issues. That's why I think there's a lot of public support when it comes to these measures that the president's taking. This is why many conservatives are saying this is something that we need, and there's something that's supporting the president. Again, it would be an easy solution because, to Monet's point, I do think the president does have to be mindful of the president that he's sending, because in another 4 years, it won't be a President Trump that we have there at the helm. I do want to move on to the topic, continuing with Trump, but on the